to another edition of the MSDW podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gumpert, editor of MSDynamicsWorld.com. Today we're joined by Mark Polino. He is the Director of Client Services at FastPath, a maker of audit, security, and compliance software for Dynamics GP and other ERPs and CRM solutions. Mark is also a longtime contributor to MS Dynamics World, and he is a longtime Microsoft MVP. He's a real Dynamics GP veteran, and he has a new book out along with fellow Microsoft MVP Ian Grieve. It is the Microsoft Dynamics GP 2016 Cookbook, published by Pact Publishing, and it's available now. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Jason. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we are here today to talk about a brand new book release that you have along with Ian Grieve. It's the Dynamics GP 2016 Cookbook. Congratulations on getting it released.
Thanks. We're really excited about it. We had a lot of hard work, and we managed to get it done actually several months early. So we're pretty excited.
Yeah. Was there anything that happened that allowed you to get it done so much faster than you estimated?
Well, so the original GP 2010 Cookbook I had written, and then I was in the middle of another book, and Ian did the update for GP 2013. So we'd each kind of written pieces separately, and this one was a true collaborative effort. So we took the pieces that we wanted to update and the things we wanted to add, and we just split it up. And I don't think it was intentional, but it just seemed to be a little bit of a race, and that we didn't want to let the other person down. And so we ended up just blowing through it. There's a lot of really good stuff in here, and I think we're kind of surprised at how fast it went.
I was looking through it earlier, and even just browsing the table of contents, it really does give you a feeling of looking at a cookbook. I have my fair share in our house of different food cookbooks, and sometimes it is really just amazing the breadth of recipes and different things that will be covered. And I mean, you really get the sense from this book. I mean, there is a lot of material in the 2016 version of the cookbook.
There is. I have all three of them sitting on my desk. And when you look at how thick the spines get from 2010 to the 2016 one, we're really not taking a whole lot out. If something no longer applies, of course, we'll pull it out, or if something has changed in GP that no longer needs to be in there. Sometimes they fix stuff or make changes and we can pull something out. But it really seems to be getting thicker. We're adding more tips and more pieces with each version.
Yeah, I mean, can you quantify that at all? And I guess, does it indicate the growth of GP functionality as well?
I think it integrates. I think it shows the growth of GP. The stuff that is coming in that needs some additional coverage it's been really nice, and there's some really cool and fun things in there. So it was a lot of fun to do.
If you were a customer, for example, or perhaps maybe a partner or an implementation person, do you give recommendations on how people should use this book? Because, again, going back to the cookbook analogy, I mean, there's a lot in here. I think anyone who really needs to know GP could be looking and reading through almost all of this. But is there a way that you recommend people attack it?
I think probably skimming the table of contents and looking for things that are maybe stand out for your particular business is a good way to start. Some of it depends on how sophisticated folks are. So there will be folks for whom, there'll be a few tips where they go, oh yeah, I already knew that. Well, that's fine. You can move on to something more detailed. And then there are some other things in there that are just really good resources to have when something difficult comes up. I know there are cases where we do integrations via a macro because there are some just sometimes it's difficult to get particular pieces of information in GP, and that's the easiest way. And so that's been fully documented since the first version. So having that available to be able to walk through a bunch of steps to make that happen is, I pull it out when I need to do it, honestly, because it's not something that I do on a daily basis. So having it and knowing where it is can be really helpful.
Do you see this book as something that partners would perhaps leave with their clients after an implementation if they have sort of a responsible admin who wants to really take ownership of the system?
Absolutely. And we actually see that a lot. We see folks who leave this with customers. I think the 2016 version is really useful too, because even though someone might not be at GP 2016, They can see some of the things that are coming or some of the things that will be in that next version. And a huge amount of these tips go all the way back to GP 2010. So it's not like it's, if you're not quite on GP 2016, you shouldn't buy it yet. Now's the time to buy it because you'll get all the stuff for your current version, and then you'll be able to see some of the cool things that are coming too.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, things really have carried forward, I guess, with even up through 2016. Things that have been introduced haven't replaced a lot of the capabilities. I'm thinking in particular of some of the top line improvements in the last release or two, like the new web client, the service-based architecture, workflow. Those things still a lot of the existing capabilities that are documented sort of continue to be there. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think a lot of the things that were still good tips and tricks in GP 2010 and 2013 are still good tips and tricks in 2016. And what's happened is we've had a bunch of new functionality, in some cases completely new, like workflow, and in some cases building on what was there. Workflow came in with GP 2013. I think it's R2, and then the versions since then have just built on it. And a lot of GP functionality is that way. Things that have been in the system for a very long time will still occasionally get updates and will still get built on and improvements. And so in the book, we try to highlight some of the new things and then some tips for some of those new things. For example, there's a section on OData, which is brand new in GP 2016. But then there's a section on security in OData and how to make sure all of that works correctly, which is something that maybe you don't think about quite so much when you're just trying to get it up and running the first time.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about the OData element. It is new. Do you feel like it's something that people or partners will know when it's the right technology to use for GP clients, or is it still something that people are just feeling out at this point?
I hope partners will figure out when it's the right thing or right time to use it. I've played with it enough to know it's still a little fragile. You don't want to return massive amounts of data yet, but the idea behind OData is that you can connect into GP securely through a web-based connection using some other tool. So that tool could be Power BI, it could be Excel, it could be Tableau, but it allows you to securely get at that GP data and be able to bring that someplace else in order to analyze. And so that secure piece and that ability to get there outside of the network. So if I have someone who is, working on the road across the world and they need to pull something out of GP, they don't necessarily have to VPN in and go through that whole hassle. OData with the right security would let them just pull it out. So I think it's hugely useful from that standpoint and will be a really big deal from analytics. But when I started playing with it, I just checked all the boxes to say, hey, I want the option to export everything, and couldn't get it to run right. And I went back to Microsoft and they were like, yeah, uncheck all of that and just check a few things and see if it works. And it did. So it's still, a first release and there's still few things to kind of be worked through, but I would absolutely not hesitate to go ahead and set it up and get people starting to play with it.
You mentioned accessing it from remote locations. Is it something that can be used, even if it's not sort of an internet-facing deployment of GP, that you could poke a hole in your firewall and just make the web services available externally?
Yes. So the idea with OData is the authentication is actually web-based. It uses a signed certificate, just like you would use to access a secured web page or something else. Mm-hmm. And that's what it uses to make that secure authentication and pass the data. So you are poking a hole in your firewall, but you've got a secure connection that it goes through. You're not just sort of randomly getting at your data. And then in addition to that, you can set security so that I could say, I want to make my payroll data available, but I only want to make it available to these 5 people, not to everyone who has access to other parts of OData GP data.
All right. So it sounds like something where people are going to want to look to use it in specific circumstances, like you said, not maybe just say, oh, just give me all the data and I'll start playing with it. That might not make GP real happy.
Right. Well, and the security is layered nicely, so you can choose what you want to publish, what you even want to make available. Most people may or may not publish their payroll data, depending on what they want to do. But even after you've chosen to say, I want to publish this, you can still say, I only want these people to be able to access it.
You document different ways of using OData. You mentioned some of them, but the book goes into, the security, connecting with Excel, connecting with Power BI. Any sort of surprising findings or ways that you think are the best for using OData right now, the most secure or the most reliable or the most, easy to adopt?
Sure. Excel consumes OData really nicely, and most folks, once they see it, sort of get that. The data that comes out is very similar to the type of information you get in a smart list, at least by default. You can certainly go deeper than that. But that makes it pretty familiar to people too. It's similar to the same data you would see in a refreshable Excel report or a smart list. It's just the connection is a little different. And so you're not having to be either VPN connection or actually, on your company network in order to get at it. So I think we'll see certainly some analysis scenarios. If you're looking at cloud-based analytics, that may be an option to get your data up there to be able to pull it in via OData. And basically what we've done is when something is relatively new, it gets more coverage in the book because in some cases people don't know anything about it. So, whether it's OData or some of the new workflow things or that type of thing, we'll spend more time on that in the cookbook because folks haven't even installed it or played with it or whatever. Where things that are a bit more familiar like payables or receivables, really what we're focused on with those tips are how to get the most out of it, based on years of working with these things. These are some little things that we've learned that can save you minutes or hours in working with those items. So, the recipes are a little different depending on really what we're trying to deal with and whether this is something that's relatively new or something that's been around for a long time.
So one chapter that got my attention was about improving GP with hacks. So I'm wondering, what's that chapter really all about? And are there certain hacks that are your favorites?
Yeah, so really in terms of hacks, we were trying to identify things that were maybe a different way of using information or using tools in GP, or maybe using something a bit outside the box there. Let me see if I can find a favorite here. What chapter do you have that at? There we go. Okay. I think for some of these, like, reducing licensing needs by preventing multi-company logins. So we get people they'll have folks log into 5 different copies of GP. So they got 5 different companies open and they're using 5 different licenses. Well, there's a little hack written by someone. It's completely free and it limits folks to a single login. So, that can save some significant dough if you're looking at having to add a whole bunch of GP users. Or, use tax. Really, GP doesn't have a great provision for use tax, but for some other taxing jurisdictions, Canada and Australia, it offers negative taxes. And so there's a way that you can use regular taxes and negative taxes to effectively do use tax. So purchase taxes that you're required to self-remit. Basically, you can apply the tax, reverse the tax out while still tracking all of that. So you're not paying the vendor, but the information's there for you to be able to go and pay the state. So those kinds of things. The tax functionality really wasn't designed to do that, but if you hack with it a little bit, you can get it to do what you want.
I mean, one of the things that maybe the hacks chapters made me think of was, when you're going through a system like this in a lot of detail, GP is also known for being very, friendly to ISV solutions that tie into it. And it's always been that way as far as I know, that companies very, very frequently add on capabilities from a third-party vendor to do, like you said, maybe it's use tax or various kinds of reporting or industry-specific stuff, supply chain capabilities. Does going through the creation of a book like this and going through all the capabilities of the system to sort of build out recipes, does it make you more aware of what GP really is good for versus, let's say, where you really should look for a third-party add-on?
Yeah, I think that it does. And we try to highlight some of those in the book. Use tax is actually a good example. It works great as a hack, and it works great if you're in one state or relatively small number of tax jurisdictions, because there's still some maintenance and things that you have to do. Much beyond that, the right answer is to go and find a solution. And that's where folks are always trying to make those decisions. They're like, well, if I can hack it and take a little pain and it saves me $10,000, I'm not ready to spend $10,000 on this particular process because right now it's pretty small. It's just kind of painful. So they work something out. But then as the company grows, they move into 4 or 5 states, and suddenly that's not maintainable. Well, then it's time to go out and find a solution. So some of these really they're just that. They're a balancing act, or they're a temporary solution. They're a solution for small scenarios. And at a certain point, absolutely the ISV solution becomes the right answer. So you definitely see that as you go through, and we try to pick out some of those as we walk through where they make sense.
I see a mention just I didn't actually see it in any chapters, but use of the support debugging tool. Has that always been in the book, or is that a new element to what you're covering?
Really, the support debugging tool was in some of the previous versions. We really tried to pull it out of the current version. We may have left something small in there in the process, but the challenge is we try to stay in the book with free stuff. And with GP 2016, the support debugging tool has moved from a free Microsoft tool to now an ISV solution. We still think it's a great solution, and we probably mentioned it in there as an ISV solution for kind of that next level of some things. But those are the types of things that we have to go and kind of clean out from version to version, or the professional services tools had to be downloaded and then they became part of GP. And then some of those tools started moving around in GP into other places. So when we go back and do a new version, we've got to go through and clean all of those pieces out.
Yeah, I noticed you do have a whole chapter on professional services tools library. From what you're saying, that might continue to change as GP evolves.
Yeah, so some of those tools which were in the professional services tools library have moved into GP proper. So as part of the book, we moved them out of that section, left them in, but moved them into another section. You got to figure out where they go. And it's a little bit of a challenge to kind of keep up with all of the changes from one version to another, and what still works and what doesn't, and those types of things.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're in your role, you're Director of Client Services at FastPath. So you're not working with GP on a daily basis anymore, I would guess. But is there still a sense of sort of interest, excitement when a new version or a new beta comes out and you're able to get your hands on it?
Yeah, it's still a lot of fun. I still do a lot of work with GP and answer a lot of questions from folks around GP. And it's fun to see suggestions that I've put in or other people that I know have put in end up in the new product. So you always want to go play with those things because you've been waiting for them for probably several versions. And then sometimes they'll surprise us with something that we weren't expecting. So we want to go play with that and see how that was implemented. And, does it work the way we want it to work, and those types of things. So it's still a lot of fun.
If you were going to put your forecasting hat on about future capabilities or future technology that you think will make its way into GP, I mean, I think if you were going to point to one thing right now, I would think like the OData capabilities and the integration of Power BI and maybe access of GP data from Power BI would be some of the kind of cool new stuff. But are there other things that you see coming down the line that are sort of inevitable next steps in what GP brings to its user base?
So from an evolutionary standpoint, I think OData will get better and more robust, I guess I would say. And we're waiting for a Power BI pack to make it easier to connect Power BI to GP. That's been promised. I don't know if it'll show up in time for GP 2016 R2 that's due out here in a little while, but that I think is absolutely coming.
Like a content pack, a Power BI content pack?
Yeah, Power BI content pack, just to make it easy to make that connection and have some pre-built reports and those types of things. I'm hoping some of the things I've seen in some other products will make it into GP. The new Project Madeira, some of the pieces we've seen, they have an automated bank reconciliation function that I would love to see trickle into GP. Essentially, it just makes a connection to your bank and pulls in and does its best to do the bank rec. GP will do that now with a file from your bank, but this is really based more on web services, and it's just a lot more streamlined. So I'd love to see something like that come into GP. Don't know that it's inevitable, but I'd love to see it there.
Yeah, as I recall, you've been advocating for something like that for quite a while, right? You've seen, banking and financial transaction integration improving generally, and you'd like to see more of that in GP.
I would. And in people's personal life now, you don't see people keying into Quicken every day. What they're doing is they're going onto the website and looking at what came through their bank and just confirming that, everything's fine. And we're just not quite there as much on the business side. Folks are going and looking at their bank website, but it's not as tightly integrated with their accounting system. They're still, if it's integrated, it's still kind of that older bank technology where they're shipping files back and forth.
What are some areas that maybe you didn't touch on in this book that, could get the sort of cookbook treatment either from you or from someone else who was feeling enterprising and like writing their own book? Like, for example, I noticed certain modules are not covered. I don't see HR and payroll in here, do I? Unless I missed it.
You probably don't. I know I don't do a ton of HR and payroll. It tends to be a specialty area. I think that'd be a great place to have some additional tips. You could probably write a cookbook on nothing but HR and payroll tips. And it's become more important in GP with the licensing changes. So now that more people are getting HR and payroll as part of the license they already own, it's something that we're seeing a lot more people using. So, I think that's a perfect example. There's really not much in the way of field service or project accounting, some of the more specialized pieces in here. The reality is we just reach a point where we kind of have to pick and choose what's going to go in because you can't fit everything you'd like to get into a particular edition.
Yeah, for sure. And there's always, you just look at the list of areas that you have covered and, whenever you look at a list of, new and enhanced features of GP, especially at a lower level, what a finance person would care about or, what someone in HR would care about. There's a long list of different, not just features, but how they can be used. I think that's, to my mind, maybe that's how this book differentiates from, say just standard documentation on how to use a feature and a function. It's not just what it is, but maybe the context of how someone would use it efficiently.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And we try to tackle a little bit different context, and the raw documentation will tell you this is what it does. And so we'll tell you, well, this is another way you can use it, or this is how it's typically used, or they don't tell you this in the documentation, but you don't want to do this because it comes out bad. So, we try to tackle those kinds of things.
Cool. Well, so the book is out now. Will you have physical copies at any upcoming events, or has that gone by the wayside as people buy more ebooks these days?
People still like paper, so we will have some physical copies at the GPUG Summit in Tampa in early October. And so the book is available both physical and in ebook format.
Excellent. And you did mention the growing size. How big is this book in paper format these days?
It's about 350 pages in paper format, 355, something like that. And I think the original one was about 300 pages. So even with all of the stuff that has come out, because we have, found things that needed to be removed or been fixed or adjusted or no longer apply, we're still, another 50 pages beyond that. We filled up all of those items and added another 50 pages.
Do you get a lot of feedback from your readers when you do come to a show and make time to talk about the books you've put out?
I do. I get lots of folks who want to come up and talk and, they'll ask specific questions. And some of them will have people walk up with a book that has a whole bunch of little yellow flags with all of their questions in it. And we'll sit and walk through all of those. So it's a lot of fun to see folks come up and chat with them.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else you're looking forward to at the Summit event as one of the main GP events coming up this fall?
I think it's going to be fun to see what's coming in GP 2016 R2. And then I've got a couple of sessions that I'm pretty excited about. I've got a security session titled Naked and Afraid, GP Security. So no one will be naked, but that's how people feel when they get told they're in charge of GP security. So we'll try to alleviate some of those fears. And then kind of in the cookbook vein, I've got a brand new session that is 50 free add-ons for GP. So these are little tools and things that people and companies have written to fill in some of those small holes or add some additional functionality to GP. And all of them are free. So that should be a fun session too.
And you just put out was it a guide to Summit? And forgive me if I forget, was it zombie themed?
It was the Undead's Guide to Dynamics GP, or to Summit, really just trying to give people an idea of what's going on at Summit, and rather than just write another, how-to, I figured we'd take a look at it from a little different perspective.
Great choice of genres there. I know you've done other ones in the past. You've done mystery. You've done mystery pieces.
Alien, anything to try to keep it fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess this is the 10-year anniversary of Summit. I actually I was talking to Pam Michalek from Microsoft about Microsoft's involvement. I'll be writing something about that shortly here. I think it sounds like their presence is going to be as strong as ever in terms of supporting the product at the user event.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a good event. I've only made it to 8 of the 10 summits. I didn't make it to the first 2. So, but it continues to grow, and I think this is going to be a good year. Tampa's a great venue, and
cool.
I think, it'll be good.
I wonder if I've been to as many as you have. I think the first one I went to was at Green Valley Ranch or Green Valley Resort in Nevada.
I did not make that. My first one was, and maybe I've only made 7. I have to double check. My first one was SeaWorld in Orlando.
Oh, I don't think I was at that one. Maybe we're both one off from each other. Or maybe we swapped years or something.
Maybe.
Congratulations on the new book. Exciting to see it out. I'm sure your publisher is thrilled to get it out sooner, ahead of schedule, which is always an accomplishment.
Yes, we were really kind of pushing to try to get it out in time for Summit, so it'd be available for folks. And so I think it'll be good to have it out and have it available for folks to be able to get it now and start working with it.
And I guess the 2 main places where people can look for it are on the Pact Publishing website, pactpub.com, or on Amazon, right?
Right, and Pact is PACKT, so PACKTpub.com, and then Amazon,
Excellent.
Of course.
Mark, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jason. Disappointed that my co-author, Ian Grieve, couldn't make it, but he got tied up at the last minute. So I just want to say thanks to Ian for all of his hard work on the book, too. I couldn't have done it without him.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks. And I know Ian did plan to be here. Obviously, he's real busy with client work, as you would expect. So we'll catch up with him next time. I'm sure we'll have you back. It's always fun to chat on GP topics with you. With that, why don't we wrap things up?
Sounds good.
This has been the MSDW podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Mark Polino for talking GP 2016 with us. If you'd like to be on the podcast, maybe you're an ISV with a product release or a consultant with a case study, don't hesitate to drop us a line. Again, I'm Jason Gumpert. You can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next week, we are MS Dynamics World signing off.